On this episode, we're joined by my friend and guest, Jesse Wilson. Jesse is a communications specialist and trial consultant who's been helping trial lawyers from around the country be better advocates for their client, helping them with their communication skills, helping them with their performance, but at a fundamental level, helping them to tell the client's stories. And Jesse, welcome. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me, Lloyd. It's great seeing you, man.
Yeah, great seeing you too. And Jesse, before we talk about your craft and how you help lawyers, we're going to talk a little bit about how we've worked together in the past. I want you to talk to the audience and tell us what you do, and also tell us your background. Tell us what your background is that's led you to this place.
Yeah, well, when you introduced me with my lawyerly title, communication specialist and jury trial consultant, there's always still that part of me that goes, how in the world did I get here? If you would have told me that I'd end up working with lawyers after being an actor for the first act of my life, I wouldn't have believed it. It's still crazy to me, but it's something that is so close to who I am, and it's home. So yeah, the first act of my life, I grew up in Hollywood, California, arts geek. Theater was really the only place that really, really made sense to me. Everything else outside of the stage still is vague. And I caught the theater bug, and that was the direction of my life. And I had the opportunity to study at the Juilliard School in New York, and that was a game changer. Kicked my ass, but I'm so grateful that I was there. And I had the opportunity also of working with one of the great legendary theater instructors. His name is Pierre Lefay, who introduced to the American theater the world of the mask. And that was like, when I started working with the mask. And what I mean by the mask is the character and the neutral mask. I was struggling and I was young and cocky and confused about the world. And when I put the mask on, immersing myself into character, that's when I really began to get in touch with a greater part of myself through another character. And that had an enormous influence on me. Speeding up, acting was clearly not the road I was meant to go down. I became a teacher. And then I began working with inmates and addicts, and they often go hand in hand, Lloyd, in prisons across Colorado. And I helped co-develop a theater behind bars workshop for inmates. And that changed my life, both personally and professionally, where I got to use the mask in prison to be able to help other people step into what I call their greater story. And that became the foundation for a program that I created while working in prison. I always got to be careful when I say that, as a guest. And that became, right, yes. And that became Tell the Winning Story. And here I am.
Well, you've talked a couple of times about working with the mask, and I know what you mean because we've worked together with the mask, but I suspect a number of our listeners may not know what you mean. Dig down in that a little bit deeper. What is the mask, and what's the purpose of it, and what does it mean for helping lawyers?
Yeah. Going back to the origin story of the mask and how that ended up becoming a pivotal part of my work with lawyers and then primarily working with witnesses, is working with the inmates really got us an opportunity to explore empathy and understanding of another human being through the use of the mask. In other words, the mask, and these are different character masks, and that are all just have these different, you've worked with them, different faces that are kind of off-putting and scary looking at first, but they force you to look at a deeper level to what might be essentially the mask behind the mask, or the role behind the role. And what the mask work got these men and women that I were working with to do is to be able to step into a greater part of themselves that allowed them to take off their own masks. And in other words, many of the men and women, you could say, were imprisoned long before they were actually in prison. And helping somebody get rid of the old idea of who they thought they were supposed to be in the world became a pivotal part for them to reintegrate into society. But they had to take off that mask first, or to work with the mask that they were wearing, or felt that they had to wear. And so helping men and women shift into a greater sense of who they were or who they are, became the work with the mask in prison. When we shift now into the legal world, what you end up seeing is really different types of masks that witnesses will wear, victims will wear. And the biggest mask that I see is they will often confuse themselves by their pain. And the lawyer, who doesn't have the trained eye to know what they're looking for, will more often than not cast the witness in the wrong role based upon the mask that they think is who they're dealing with. And so really, a lot of people have heard me talk about the victim to victor approach, and that's really the foundational kind of core of what I do with Tell the Winning Story. That began, once again, working with men and women behind bars, because what I learned to do and what I learned to help them do is to not define themselves by their pain. So if we keep it real world, let's go to the courtroom. The primary message that the lawyer wants to communicate, in my opinion, to the jury is this: ladies and gentlemen, my client is not their pain. And I'm going to repeat that. My client is not their pain. Who they are is the strength, key word, the strength of trying to overcome their pain. That's who they are. That's a subtle, but it's a game-changing difference. And once again, when we come back to the metaphor, the symbolism of the mask, when you wear these masks, these strange, ugly, contorted masks, it's easy to want to play this character by what it is you're seeing, the scary, warped, painful face. But the work that we do in the theater allows you to look deeper and allows you to find an identifiable strength or a redeeming part of this character that you can tap onto. And that training then trains the director's eye, and that's who you are as the storyteller for the right story to the jury. It trains your eye to know what you are looking for. And so when you do the work with the mask, this is why I love working with the masks in so many of the workshops that I do with lawyers, is that you go through two stages. The stage one is, when you first put on the mask, is you want to judge that character by this pain. So you get a very strange, kind of scary looking mask. Can you see this? I brought one here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You look at that thing and it's scary as hell. Right?
Exactly.
And anybody would,
nostrils, big eyes.
Yes. Anybody would want to wear this. If you put this on, here, I'll do this really quick. If you put this on, right, it's scary. I've yet to hear anybody wear this. No, well, what a lovely, cuddly, no, it's scary as shit. And it's easy to want to play this character, right, as a villain, yes, right, like that.
Yeah.
Now I'm stealing a moment that was in a recent workshop where a lawyer, this woman that I've never worked with her before, she puts this mask on, this actual mask on, this was last week, and she begins rocking an imaginary child to sleep. And she is talking now like this, and the bombs are flying down, and I think it was a scene from Ukraine, and they're getting closer and closer. And she holds this child and she's stroking it, and it became a scene of a grandmother in her last moments to her grandson. And she kept calling her babushka, babushka, babushka. And all of a sudden, the mask changes, the mask transforms. So you see, when you're the director, and you are the director for the right story that needs to be told, you've got to train yourself to see that there's something going on beneath the mask. Who is this person?
That's so wonderful the way you describe it, Jesse. We as lawyers, we talk about sort of the metaphorical mask, the armor we wear, the face that we put on to the world. We want to
Yes.
present ourselves a certain way. And I'm sure it's not limited to lawyers. It's probably just part of the human condition in general. And you bring the sort of a physical representation of the mask into the equation where people can literally see themselves transformed. I mean, you put that mask on a moment ago, and immediately I'm seeing somebody different because we're so visual.
Yeah.
And it gives, and I've seen this at work. I had the opportunity to spend a weekend with you in a workshop, and some of my closest friends, trial
that was
lawyers,
fun.
were there. That was a great time, and most of the time was working, but we had some fun also outside of work. But what I remember is people that I have known for years, and know them well, and when they put the mask on, they had the freedom to explore personalities and approaches to situations that they've never seen
right.
before. And
That's
it was a
right.
little bit arresting. I was like, wait a second, what happened to my friend? What have you done with him?
Yeah.
You know, so I think that the power of that was just remarkable.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd
Well,
like to
thank
talk.
you. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just on those lines, something that Josh Carton, the legendary Josh Carton, had said when we first really got to know each other and work together. And I think this is the Trial Lawyers College way back when. He said something profound, as he often does. He said, the mask doesn't conceal, it reveals. And that has always resonated with me. And that's exactly the intent behind the mask. It needs the intent behind the mask is to reveal who this person really is at their core. And as a director, you get to make one decision among many, but the most important decision. Who is this person? Are they a victor or are they a victim? Do I want to define this character by their pain or by the strength of trying to overcome their pain? And when you make that decision, this warped, scary thing on the surface disappears. And that's the transfer in the courtroom. So,
Yeah, that's so good. You brought up our mutual friend, one of my dear friends, Josh Carton, and I know he's been. You and Josh are often thought of together because you're both approaching the field of helping lawyers, trial lawyers, represent their clients more effectively and more authentically. And I know Josh has his theater background, acting background, and I'm have Josh on. I'm going to invite him onto my show at some point because he's a wonderful human being and has so much to offer as you do.
yeah.
You said one thing that I want to explore a little bit more, which is so powerful. It's the concept of a victim to victor. Tell us more what that means, and what is that? What's the context of that expression?
Absolutely. Well, let's take it back to the 6,000-year-old tradition here called the theater, right? We hear the word storytelling all the time. And storytelling is an important thing, and I think it's becoming even more popular. More and more people are starting to embrace what that means. And why that's what I consider to be the most important trial lawyer skill there is out there, trial skill out there. And when I talk about the victim to victor, it's important to see it through the lens of what a great director does. And I think the best way to illustrate that, Lloyd, is a story that I've loved to share with you. I'll keep it brief. You've probably heard me share this story before. But this illustrates the point and the purpose of victim to victor. Many, many years ago, in fact, the last play, I think official play that I was in was an off-Broadway production of Death of a Salesman. I write about this in my book. I share about this. You probably heard me tell it, but I love this story. We were in Death of a Salesman, as you know. It's the story of Willie Loman, who is a shadow of his former self. And spoiler alert, he kills himself at the end. Hello, Death of a Salesman, right? And I was in the cast, and I played Willie Loman's. He has two sons, Biff and Happy, and I played Happy Loman, who I always say was anything but happy. But anyway, our director comes in, and we're doing a table read, and he says, his name is Murray Ross. He's since passed, brilliant guy. says to all of us sitting around, but particularly to the actor playing Willie Loman, at no point, he says, can any of you, he says, I have one non-negotiable in this production. And if any of you deviate from this non-negotiable, I'm going to kick your asses out of the theater. And he meant it. He said, at no point can anybody ever feel sorry for themselves on stage. And in particular, again, he's looking at Willie Loman. Because the minute you make that choice, we don't have a play. And so what is the difference between a great production of Death of a Salesman and a terrible crap production of Death of a Salesman? It's not in the words. It's not in the script. It's nothing that Arthur Miller is saying. There's no postscript that says, by the way, don't play Willie Loman like a victim. But most of the time, if you've ever seen this production, 99.9% of the time, it's painful. You see Willie Loman feeling sorry for himself on stage, or the actor playing Will, right, and then you're like, give me the frickin' razor blades. But when the actor makes the choice to play Willie Loman as a fighter, as somebody who doesn't give up, despite, and that is my favorite word in the courtroom, by the way, despite what has been taken from him, we end up feeling his pain at an even greater level, and we're celebrating him. This guy, you've got the actor and the director playing Willie Loman, or the director directing Willie Loman, has to make the choice to play him as a fighter. And then it becomes riveting. Even though we know what the ending of the story is, it becomes riveting, because now we're seeing somebody who, despite everything, is doing the best they can to not give up. So I give that example because that is the victim to victor approach. You are the director for the right story. And you're making one of the most important, significant choices. And it's really simple. I'm either going to tell the story of a person who's doing the best they can to try to overcome their pain, or I'm not. I'm either going to tell the story of a victim or a victor. And you're here to tell the truth. The truth of your client is you want to define them by their strength, not their weakness, because we're here to tell the truth. If they weren't their strength, they wouldn't be here. And so, that's a subtle but a game-changing approach that I see many lawyers, unfortunately, still painfully not making, which is, it's so easy to get caught into the victim trap. And then let's go to depositions, which is really about you casting, or deposition preparation, which is really you casting your witness in the right role. Most witnesses will cast themselves in the wrong role. And it's not to minimize their pain. God knows it's not to minimize anything that they're going through. But they have been conditioned, they have been raised, they have been bred on movies and TVs and films where most of the time you're seeing the witness as the can't person. Right? And then the lawyer, the director, makes the fatal decision to say, oh yeah, that's who you are. And all of a sudden now you've just framed your case in a completely different way, because you haven't made that most important choice to say, my client is not their pain. They are the strength of trying to overcome their pain, and I can't wait for you to meet them.
That's so brilliant, Jesse, and it's absolutely spot on for the trial lawyers listening to this, because when I was a much younger attorney and sort of finding my way, we did not have the benefit of Jesse Wilson or many of the great consultants and thinkers in this area. This is sort of a golden age. There's so much good information out there, but that is spot on, because it's oriented towards the audience, which is the jury, and ultimately that is to use your example of theater, that is the audience, and that relationship that the actor
Absolutely.
or the attorney and the witnesses, it's all about relationships. I want to tell you one quick story from a trial I had a number of years ago, based on these principles that many of them I'd gotten from you. Lovely client, short haul truck driver, healthy as a bear, strong guy, goes in for a regular physical at a urgent care place,
Right.
and they go to draw his blood for routine blood work. He's sitting up on the table. You're never supposed to ever have your blood drawn sitting up on a table. So anybody listening to this, please tell your doctors or your PAs or whoever, do not ever give blood sitting up on a table, because you can pass out. Even if you never passed out before, you can pass out. And that's unfortunately what happened to this gentleman. He was sitting up on a table. Young person comes, takes his blood, turns around, he passes out, and he falls unprotected off the table, snaps his neck, permanent spinal cord injury, quadriplegic. just in the blink of an eye, father,
Yeah.
a loving wife, wonderful relationship, two boys, great people.
Wow.
It's quadriplegic.
Terrifying.
Just in the blink of an eye, and unnecessary. All they had to do was put him in a chair or lay him down on the table. But anyway, just a story that your heart goes out, because we all, there could be anybody in that situation. Well, we go to trial, and the defense did something smart. They admitted liability. Of course, they did it right before trial, for strategic purposes, but they still did it, and give them kudos for that. But we go to trial, and the jury, the defense, I think everybody was prepared for the sad story of this horrible tragedy. Feel sorry for me, waiting for the tears to come. But sort of embracing this victim to victor approach, I put Chris up on the witness stand. He wheels up in his chair. He turns to the jury, and just sort of settles in. I said, "Well, Chris," I go, "do you remember that movie Apollo 13 when the rocket blew up and everything's going crazy and everything's chaos down in mission control? And the first question the flight control person said, he's like, 'Everybody be quiet.' He goes, 'Let's talk in terms of status. Let's talk in terms of what's working, what's good.' I said, 'Remember that movie?' He said, 'Yeah.' And I said, 'Well, I want to talk in terms of status. And we'll talk about your injury. We'll talk about that down the road. But just tell us what's good in your life. Tell us what you got going on that you're grateful for, and that you're happy about.' And he lit up like a Christmas tree, and the jury was jarred. They weren't expecting that, and they looked at him and they said, or Chris said, he goes, 'Well,' he goes, 'I've got a great wife who loves me, and I love her, and she's the light of my life, and he goes, I've got two teenage boys, because they're great kids, but they don't listen to me enough and don't do what I tell them to, and they should. One of them needs to spend more time with his schoolwork.' I mean, just in this moment, the jury's
Brilliant.
laughing, and they almost came out of their chairs and wanted to put their arms around him, because here's a person, like you said, who's not viewing himself as a victim, viewing himself as somebody who's got things to be grateful for. And I saw it in, beyond books and beyond seminars. I saw it in action, and I've embraced that approach with every trial since, from the most catastrophically per person.
It's just so smart. And in terms of what you just did in there, I mean, if we can break, that's a great example. And if we can unpack what was so effective about starting off your direct with joy. By the way, talk about this all the time. In order for the victim to victor story to take flight with your jurors, you got to have the second wing of the plane. And the second wing of the plane is joy, right? It's one thing to make the decision to take the victim to victor approach. That's great, but that's only one wing. If you don't bring in joy, then the plane goes down. And what do I mean by that? Well, what you just did in that direct is you made what I call the bank deposit. And the bank deposit is once you deposit joy, you now get to withdraw the pain. It has now given you credibility and permission from the jurors. Whether you have your client talk about their pain or not, most of the time I kind of like them keeping it joy and have everybody else talk about what is behind that mask. But there are times in your direct when you're like, okay, listen, and I don't know what your direct looked like after that, but once you've made that deposit, now, all right, let's talk about the challenging things that got you to that place where you were able to find that joy in your life again. And now you get to embrace what the Navy SEAL call embrace the suck, right? Because you've made that bank deposit. And that's such an important thing. Another thing that happens with joy, this is why joy is so powerful in the courtroom. A lot of people think, well, is it just because it humanizes the client and makes me look more credible? Yeah, that's a part of it. But there's a psychological aspect that happens when you show the jurors joy. When we say joy is contagious, jurors only think about one thing and one thing only, right? Me and mine. When you're talking about something that gives you joy, I don't care what, our lives could be so different. But if I'm talking about who I love and what do I love, when your client is talking about their wife and their kids and all that, there's something within the jurors, and you cannot help it. You cannot help it that automatically thinks about me and mine. You start talking about your wife, yeah, I'm listening to you, but I'm thinking about my wife. You talk about your kid, I'm now thinking about my kid. That becomes a transfer. And now what's underneath that joy is protection. And what's underneath that protection is fear. And what's underneath that is anger. You do that to me, if that's me and mine, F you, right? That's why the golden rule stuff is poo-pooed in the courtroom. Did I just say poo-pooed? I'll never say poo-pooed again. That's why the golden rule is not allowed in there, because it's so damn effective. The victim-to-victor approach, especially when you're starting with joy, gets you to the golden rule more powerfully than anything else. And that's through inspiration and hope, not through anger and fear and pain.
And from the advocate's point of view, it feels more honest. I mean, you don't want to dwell in that sort of arena of tears and sadness, and you talk about the activation emotions, the high activation emotions.
Yes.
Things, fear, love is another high activation emotions. Things that motivate versus the low activation emotions, sadness, resignation.
Right.
There's things that make you want to curl up and just wait for the storm to pass.
Absolutely. And, look, do I think it's important that the jurors end up feeling angry? Yes. Do I think it's important that the jurors end up feeling fear? Absolutely. But what's going to get you to anger and fear faster than anything else? Love, hope, and joy. That's what gets you to anger and fear faster.
You were asking me about the rest of that direct examination.
Yes.
And the defense will almost always give you opportunities where you weren't expecting them. So I talk, when I'm talking to other lawyers about trial presentation, I talk a lot about keeping open to opportunity, because you're going to create your game plan. You're going to spend a lot of time with your trial notebook and preparing your examinations and trying to script out everything so you are completely prepared. But then you have to set it aside and be in the moment where you can take opportunities. And we had one opportunity in that trial where the defense was making a big point that, he can really do more than he's letting on. He's more functional than he's pretending to be, because he can actually walk. And the jury was jarred by that. What do you mean he can walk? Well, he was what's called an incomplete quadriplegic, where he did have the ability to stand up, strap on those one-arm crutches, and very awkwardly move very, very short distances, kind of throwing his leg up. So they're making an issue of this. I said, well, Chris, we've heard people talking about what they say you can do and can't do. Let's just show the jury. I want the jury to see what you can do. Would it be okay if you walked across the courtroom? So he wheels across the courtroom, and he puts his crutches on, and he pulls his one leg out of the strap. The next one, he stands up, and he ungainly walks towards the jury, and he goes, I do need to say something. He says, normally, we've been in trial this week, but on a normal day, I would have about 45 minutes to an hour with Debbie to help stretch me out. So I'm just not walking as good today as I normally can, because he goes, I want you to know that I can normally do a whole lot better than I'm doing right now, with 45 minutes to an hour of stretching. And I mean, the jury, it encompassed everything that is the character of this.
And now they're seeing what is beneath the cover of the book.
Right.
Now you're squashing the "he looks fine" argument. What's the problem? Right. Yeah. And I love that approach. I think that's great. You shoved it right up their wazoo. The defense's argument. It's beautiful. I worked on a case recently where right in the very, very beginning of our opening is plaintiff is going to come here. He's going to sit here. He's going to look perfectly fine. And he's going to smile, and he's going to be articulate. He might have a slight limp, but he's going to look perfectly fine, and we're going to agree. He looks perfectly fine. But what you're not going to see, but what you're going to learn is, boom, and then we tell the enormous amount of struggles between, the enormous amount of hurdles getting up to that point where he looks, quote unquote, fine. And then you polarize. Will you be the judge? Is he fine or is he not? And you've embraced their greatest attack, and you've made an even greater victor. And the greater the victor, the greater the damages that we see, because we see the journey of what it took for him to be, quote unquote, fine. One of the
Go ahead. I mean,
no. Please.
Yeah, I was just we've been talking about a lot of different sort of concepts, but it seems that the foundational concept is credibility in the courtroom. Credibility for the advocate, credibility for the witnesses, and credibility in that relationship with the jury. What would you say to somebody listening to this, maybe a cynical defense lawyer here to gain opposition research or whatever they're doing? Hopefully they're a fan, but what would you say to people who say, well, this seems gimmicky, this seems like sort of underhanded kind of ninja type tactics to manipulate the jury into feeling inauthentic feelings with the hope of getting them to give you more money? How would you respond to that?
Not true.
I know. Explain why that's not true.
It's not true because you're here to tell the truth of who they are. You're making a choice to say this is who they are, and if you can say that your client is not their pain, they are the strength of trying to overcome their pain, then your job is to tell the truth and to show the truth, and that's a groundbreaking decision versus that my client is their pain and their life is forever ruined and they can never. You're more in risk of the sympathy trap. I mean, they're always going to think, oh, well, you're right. It's a battle of credibility always. But you want to get out of the sympathy trap as fast as you possibly can. My client is not here for sympathy. And if you show their struggle of trying to overcome their pain, the only risk would be, I suppose, is they really are fine. Then why are you here? But if you're trusting that they have what has been taken from them has created an enormous amount of pain, both physical and emotional pain in their life, then once again, the struggle to try to overcome their pain reveals their pain at an even greater level because they don't want to be seen as a victim. And so I guess that's a long-winded answer of saying that cuts back enormously. You can't get rid of it entirely. I'm not saying this is the number one cure-all that's going to keep your credibility high, but more often than not, when you show the story of strength, I've yet to hear from jurors that I focus group and for jurors in real trial, yeah, that guy seemed like he was really trying to, it gets you out of the malingerer thing. I've yet to hear them say, well, that your client really seemed like he was trying so hard to show his joy. And why is that a bad thing? And one of the does that answer your question?
It does. It
sort
does.
Of kind of.
Yeah, it definitely does. And we started off this podcast talking about your background in theater. And that was one of the sort of great epiphanies in my mind, was that what we're doing is theater. And I resisted that initially because it seems to minimize the importance, so maybe some self-importance of what what I perceived I was doing. I perceive, you want to believe you've got to pick up your sword of justice and you're fighting and fight. Everything's fighting in a lot of the conceptualization of trial work, which I resist. We can talk about that in a little bit, but some people you'll know well. We talked about Josh Carton, but Josh worked with another real pioneer and enormous hero of mine, David Ball, and who also has a theater background. You're starting to see a pattern.
There are a few of us out there. Yeah, we're kind of cut out of that cloth. Yeah.
Yeah, and you bring your talents, but David and Josh, and there was another participant, I can't remember her name now, but anyway, they put together a program, what theater can teach trial lawyers, and that's kind of where the spark in my head lit, was this parallel, because we really are, as the trial lawyers, we wear a lot of hats. One of them is director, one of them is actor, one of them is director of props, with demonstrative evidence, costume,
Sure.
to some degree. Yeah. There are a lot of roles, and that excited me because, spoiler alert, I was a theater guy coming along, and I used to was very active in the theater, particularly in high school, and it kind of, so this practice sort of scratched a lot of itches, but the concept of theater.
At some point, sorry, Lloyd, at some point you have to do your Hamilton for your listeners. You just, because that will forever stay with me. But I apologize. I interrupted you.
That might
Yeah.
get me banned from the major podcasting outlets. But
No,
anyway,
no, I think you'll increase your audience 1,000-fold. It's brilliant, folks. You got to see him
well,
do it. Anyway,
well, I appreciate that.
it's true.
But for a long time, I had equated acting to pretending.
Yeah,
And, the
yeah,
person is just memorizing somebody
yeah,
else's words and
yeah,
pretending to be a character.
yeah.
And it wasn't until later that I appreciated that acting is not pretending, it's revealing truth. It's revealing the truth of the character, revealing the truth of the situation. I'd like you to talk about the role of acting in terms of what trial lawyers can learn from the profession of acting and how that can help us be more effective with our clients.
Absolutely. And I think the best answer to that question is to just go back and clarify a little bit of what we just talked about. Are you running the risk of somebody thinking that this is ham on rye, inauthentic, dog and pony show if you show the joy too much in their life? Well, you're walking a tightrope of credibility all the time. But ultimately, and this comes back to answering your question about acting, ultimately, your case is what you make it about. If you're making the decision, and this is the difference, in my opinion, between a great actor and a mediocre actor. You can make a mediocre actor, I think, into a really, really great actor. I believe it, by making this choice. When the actor and the director, in my opinion, they're one and the same, make the choice to say, I'm going to play this person by their strength versus their opposite, more often than not, the credibility of this character, the credibility of this client will go through the roof.
Give us some
Because,
examples of that. Tell us more what you mean, and maybe
well,
some popular examples in culture that to sort of illustrate that point.
yeah, well, I gave the example of Willie Loman, right? Maybe not
Right.
everybody is familiar with Death of the Salesman. But if you take any character, let's say, what's a popular character on TV that we can all agree on? Hero character or movie. What's one of your favorite movies, Lloyd?
Oh
About a
gosh.
character, sorry, about a character who, and by the way, this question I ask every witness that I work with within usually the first 5 minutes in witness preparation. Who is a character from a movie that you love who doesn't give up? Well, that's pretty much every character in every movie. So, take Rudy, take Rocky, take Million Dollar Baby, take, what's one of your favorites, Lloyd?
I'm a fan of The Godfather. That's one of my.
How can you
and
not be? All right.
Right.
So let's go to
Michael
Michael
Corleone.
Corleone. Yeah, Michael Corleone. All right. So what does Michael Corleone want in this movie?
He starts off wanting to separate from the family, separate from the organized crime, all that world, and he wants to be in respectable society. He's a war
Yeah.
hero. He wants to rise to the level of a senator or somebody important, but in the legitimate world.
Yeah.
And that's his
Yeah.
struggle is to stay in that lane and removed from his family. But then
Yeah.
the challenge is he gets pulled
And
back
let's
in.
take everything that, pull me back in. Well, that was in four or three.
That was later. Yeah, we don't talk about
three.
part
Yeah,
three.
yeah. But yeah, that's
This is
right.
part
Yeah.
one.
I never wanted this life lead Michael, Marlon Brando
Yeah.
says, and he gets pulled in, right? Um, let's look beneath the surface of what is it he really, really wants. Let's take everything that you just said and let's just crystallize it into maybe one sentence or one statement or maybe even one word. What do you think is the core essence of what Michael Corleone wants?
He wants to be his own man. He wants
He
to
wants
be.
to be his own man. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Now, that's subject to change, but I think, he wants to be his own man. So all characters want something. As the actor, again, for me, they're one and the same. You've got to know what you're looking for. A question you want to ask yourself when you're taking on a role is, what does my character want? What do they really, really want? And keep going and keep going and keep going until you get to the essence of who they really are based upon what they really, really want. All characters want something. The minute you can identify what is it they really want, and if we're keeping it going in the real world into trial, what does a client really, really want? Well, the stock answer on the surface, well, they want justice. Well, what the hell does that mean? No, what they really, really want. They want to forgive their dad, or they want to be able to be okay with the man or the woman in the mirror, which is always the greatest battle, which is always emotional. If I'm not okay with me, nobody stands a chance. Or I want to make peace with my dead brother, or whatever that is. That's what they really, really want. And once you can identify what a character, client, really, really wants, then you immediately set up the conflict. What gets in the way of what this character wants? Okay, so if we go back to Michael Corleone, let's go with what you said. He wants to be his own man. He wants to be his own man. What gets in the way of that? What gets in the way of him being his own man? What's the emotional conflict? Forget about all the drama that we see unfold. The core conflict of Michael Corleone is what?
It's duty to his family. The sense of that he owes his family and that he loves his family and feels protective over it.
Right.
And when it's really at its core, it's a story about family, dysfunctional, murderous.
Yeah.
Caveat. I'm not advocating, criminal crime families, but yeah, he wants separation. But then the prodigal son, he comes back because he's needed. He feels that he has a role to fill and that people are counting on him.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we say family, and yeah, absolutely. He's torn his loyalty for his family, but I think if we got even simpler than that, I think, in my opinion, the strength of The Godfather, or the heart of The Godfather, which is it's a common theme. It's a father-son story. It's a love story. You're messing with my father. How can I possibly walk away? Everything in me is screaming to get out. My own father never wanted me to join the mafia. I never wanted this life for you, Michael. You're right. But, but he can't. But Michael can't walk away. I mean, that's a hell of a conflict. So as an actor, you want to make this work really, really simple for yourself. And as a director, you want to make this work really, really simple for yourself. What do I want, and what's getting in the way of what I want, right? And when in the theater, when we say we raise the stakes, right? We raise the stakes. The greater the greater the desire, the greater the obstacle. And so, at the heart of all great movies, it's a character-driven movie. What is it that gets in the way of what great characters want? And that, when you can find that sacred struggle or that conflict, now you got something to work with. You want to find something that works against you. So let's take it into your approach. Let's take this acting, this basic kind of 101 acting approach, which is, what do I want? What's getting in the way of what I want? To the witness. Okay, what is it they really, really want? And once you find out what they really, really want, now we're in victor territory, right? Now we're finding I want to find the strength to be able to inspire my kids. I want to not give up it's usually about somebody else. It's a story of self-sacrifice. That's usually around the core of what they want. And then we've got a great struggle that gets in the way of that. So there's the physical injury that gets in the way of what they really, really want, but then there's the emotional damages, something that we don't always really talk about. Keith Mitnick talks about pilot-light pain, and he's absolutely right, but most of us look at that as physical. How about the emotional pilot-light pain, the thing that gets in the way of what the witness really, really wants? And once you're able to get into that place of what they want and what gets in the way of what they want, now you've literally set the stage to cast them in the right role as somebody who's trying to overcome that pain that keeps them from what they really, really want. And then that becomes a universal theme that ties that into your juror connection. So once again, I go back to, what is it that makes a great actor, or what is it that makes what would be a mediocre actor into what I think would be a really good and compelling actor? Is asking themselves this question. It's not always on the page. It's not always in the script. They have to find, okay, all right, I'm not seeing a conflict here that's something I can play. How do I find, all right, then you got to find whatever it is and you got to make it so personal to yourself. And once you're able to find that sacred struggle, Now you're working against something. We see a character who wants something despite. And once you back that up, what do I want? What's getting in the way of what I want? With the ultimate decision, no matter what character I'm playing, no matter what role you're giving me, whether it's a victor or if I'm an actor, or whether it's a villain. Let's say I'm playing Hannibal frickin' Lecter, right? I always want to make the choice to play the victor. And wait a minute, I just gave you a villain, right? The victor concepts also works for your villains in the courtroom. Why? Because the cardinal rule that an actor never wants to break, if you're giving me the role of an evil, villainous guy, the most important decision I can make is to not play the villain like he's a villain, like she's a villain, right? Villains never see themselves as villains. What do they see themselves as? Victors.
Misunderstood.
Misunderstood, but they see themselves as victors, right? I've been wrong.
Jesse, this is just such great information. We're
coming
cool? Up to the end of our session here today, but I want to talk about a couple of things quickly before we wrap up.
Yeah.
I have had the privilege of working with you before, and I'm looking forward to working with you again in the future.
Me too, Brad.
I appreciate that. And for the lawyers listening to this today, particularly maybe the younger lawyers, less experienced, how can they first of all connect with you and learn more about your program, the Victim to Victor? How can they talk to us about what's available in the world of Jesse Wilson to help other lawyers be more successful?
Great. Well, I'm the easiest person to get a hold of. If you go to my website, tellthewinningstory.com, or shoot me an email, Jesse, Jesse, not I-E, but Jesse at tellthewinningstory.com. We've got tons of CLE programs that we're doing, virtual and in person. I got one I'm doing 2 weeks with the great Mel Orchard, as you know. Yeah, it's called Tell It Like a Movie. I'm doing a lot of programs, a lot of different organizations, still working with TLC and Trial School with Rich Newsom, what he's doing up there. So I'm around. I'm not going anywhere. So, yeah, tellthewinningstory.com and shoot me an email.
Well, Jesse, it's been great having you on the show today. Thank you for your time and sharing so much of your skill and your talent and passion with my audience and with me. And this has just been a wonderful afternoon with you. So thanks again, and I will look forward to seeing you soon.
Lloyd, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me, buddy.
You bet. Take care.